All right, diving in today, and looks like you sent us chapter 7 this time from a book about the future of education, and
Right.
it seems like you were really interested in this whole data security thing,
Yeah.
which is, I mean, smart
Great.
move. I mean,
Absolutely.
the more we rely on tech for learning, the bigger deal this becomes.
Right.
So maybe you're prepping for some big meeting or you're researching a new project, who knows?
Yeah.
But whatever it is, I think we're going to uncover some pretty fascinating insights together.
Definitely. I think one of the things that struck me about this chapter is that it doesn't just talk about theory.
Okay.
It actually gets into how to keep learner data safe.
Mm-hmm.
And the way it starts off is really interesting.
Okay.
It compares data breaches to car accidents.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
Right.
How are those two things similar?
Well, just like you can't prevent every single car accident,
Mm-hmm.
you can't guarantee 100% protection against data breaches either.
Okay.
They're going to happen.
Got it. The key is to manage the risks.
So it's more about minimizing the damage than
Yeah.
stopping every single incident.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that's where the 3 pillars of data security come in.
Okay.
Confidentiality, integrity, and accessibility.
Okay, I get confidentiality, like keeping data secret,
Right.
and integrity, making sure it's accurate.
Mm-hmm.
But accessibility, how does that relate to security?
Well, think about it this way.
Okay.
If a system is so secure that no one can access the information,
Right.
is it really doing its job?
Okay.
Especially when you're talking about learning,
Yeah.
where you need information quickly and easily.
To learn effectively?
Exactly.
Okay, so too much security can almost be a bad thing. Like,
Wow.
if I'm trying to take an online quiz and it takes, 5 minutes for the page to load because of all the security measures,
Exactly.
I'm not learning anything. I'm just getting frustrated.
Right. It's all about finding that sweet spot where data is protected, but also available when learners and educators need it.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So we've talked about the what we're trying to protect.
Mhm.
Let's talk about the who are the bad guys, so to speak.
Right.
Who are we trying to protect this data from? And the chapter mentions a pretty wide range. Everything from individual learners who might try to cheat
Right.
to, wait for it,
Mm-hmm.
nation state hackers.
It is a wide range, and it's
Ah,
you might be surprised how easy it's becoming to be one of those bad guys.
really?
In the digital world, anyway, the author points out that even someone with very basic tech skills could potentially launch a cyber attack these days. I mean, there are literally step-by-step tutorials online.
Okay, so that's a little unsettling to think about.
Yeah.
It seems like the barrier to entry for cybercrime is getting lower and lower.
Definitely.
So what about the more sophisticated threats, organized groups or even government-backed hackers?
Right. The chapter mentions these advanced persistent threats,
Yeah.
APTs.
Yeah, think of APTs,
Okay.
like the elite hackers
Okay.
in the cyber world.
Got it.
Well-funded, organized, and incredibly stealthy.
So they're kind of like the digital ninjas,
Yeah.
going after specific targets
Exactly.
with really high-tech tools.
Yes, and with all the advancements in things like quantum and supercomputing,
Mm-hmm.
APTs are only getting more sophisticated.
So it's not just about stopping someone from guessing a password anymore.
No.
We're talking about next-level attacks.
Right.
Okay. The chapter also talks about social engineering.
Yeah.
And there's this Russian term, maskirovka,
Mm-hmm.
which, I don't know, it sounds a little intimidating when you say it like that.
Maskirovka, yeah.
Maskirovka.
It's a fascinating concept.
Okay.
It goes beyond just hacking technology.
Okay.
It's really about deception and manipulation,
Mm-hmm.
playing mind games
Mm.
to influence people's actions.
Got it.
I mean, think about it.
We are bombarded with so much information online these days.
Yeah, it's hard to even know what's real anymore.
Exactly. It's hard to tell what's real and what's fake. And
Right.
that makes us all vulnerable to this kind of manipulation.
Okay.
Whether it's falling for a phishing scam or believing disinformation.
So it's not just about firewalls and encryption anymore.
Yeah.
It's also about, being savvy about the information that we're consuming and
Yeah.
who we're trusting online.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've got this whole spectrum of threats from individual cheaters all the way up to nation state hackers and these master manipulators.
Right.
So what are we actually doing to counter all of this? The chapter talks about some current approaches to cybersecurity,
Yeah.
but it also hints that they might not be enough.
Mm-hmm.
So what are we doing right and
Yeah.
where are we falling short?
Some of the current models for cybersecurity investment are kind of like trying to make every car a tank.
Okay.
Focusing on building these impenetrable fortresses around data But as you can imagine, that gets incredibly costly and inefficient.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like trying to make everything 100% risk-free.
Right.
You end up sacrificing functionality and user experience.
Exactly.
Okay.
So the chapter highlights some best practices,
Okay.
like regular reviews of security standards and vulnerability assessments.
Mm-hmm.
But it also points to some new technologies that could play a key role in the future of learning ecosystems.
Okay.
Things like XAPI and Kafka.
All right, you're going to have to break those down for me because I'm not familiar with those.
Sure.
And they sound a little technical.
So XAPI is basically a way to track and record learning experiences,
Oh, good.
whether they're happening online or offline.
Okay.
So imagine like a universal translator for learning data.
Mm-hmm.
That's XAPI.
Okay, got it.
And Kafka is a system that's built to handle huge streams of data in real time.
Oh,
So think of it like a super efficient traffic controller,
Okay.
directing all that data where it needs to go.
So how do those two things fit into this whole data security puzzle that we're talking about?
Well, as learning environments become more interconnected,
Right.
we're going to be generating tons and tons of data about learners.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So XAPI gives us a standardized way to collect and share that data,
Okay.
while Kafka ensures that it can be processed quickly and securely.
Got it.
So it's about managing that flow of information.
Mm-hmm. But even with these new tools, it seems like there's still this tension between security and accessibility.
Yeah.
Like the chapter quotes Larry Smith from the USMC College of Distance Education and Training, and it really resonated with me, he says.
Yeah.
Our network is very secure, but it's slow and doesn't perform well. So the real question becomes, how do you balance accessibility with security? How do you meet both?
Right.
And I think we've all experienced that frustration,
Absolutely.
of trying to use a system that's so secure, it's practically unusable.
Exactly. And that's why the chapter suggests we need to shift our thinking about data security. Instead of trying to prevent every single breach, which is practically impossible,
Right.
we need to focus on minimizing the impact of those breaches.
So it's a more proactive approach, like anticipating that breaches will happen.
Exactly.
And building in safeguards.
Right. And they connect this idea to something called normal accident theory,
Okay.
which basically says that complex systems will inevitably fail.
Oh, okay.
So we need to design for resilience, anticipating those failures, and building in safeguards.
So what would that look like in practice? Like, what are some specific strategies that organizations can use to build more resilient systems?
Well, the chapter recommends a few key strategies.
Okay.
One is separating data lakes
Okay.
through network and organizational segmentation.
Okay, can you break that down for me
Sure.
in plain English?
Imagine your data is like a valuable treasure.
Okay.
Instead of keeping it all in one giant vault, you divide it up and store it in multiple smaller vaults.
Okay.
That way, if one vault is compromised, the thieves don't get access to everything.
Okay, that's a great analogy.
Right.
So it's about containing the damage,
Yeah.
limiting the impact of a breach.
Exactly.
What other strategies do they suggest?
Another big one is using blockchain technology.
Ah, blockchain. It seems like everyone's talking about blockchain these days.
I know, right?
But how does it actually apply to data security?
Well, think about your own educational records,
Okay.
your transcripts, diplomas, certificates.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine if those records were stored on a system where they could never be tampered with,
Okay.
ever.
Right?
That's the power of blockchain.
Wow.
It's like a digital vault that guarantees the integrity of your information.
So in the context of education, it could help ensure that student records and credentials are authentic and haven't been altered.
Right.
That's a really compelling application.
Yeah.
What else?
They also talk about something called one-way data valves.
Okay. I have no idea what that means.
It's a bit technical. But essentially, it's a way to control the flow of data,
Okay.
making sure that it can only move in one direction.
So it's like a one-way street for data.
Exactly.
Okay.
This is especially useful for protecting sensitive data that needs to be accessed, but not downloaded or modified.
Okay.
For example, if a researcher needs to access student data for a study,
Right.
a one-way data valve could allow them to view the data,
Okay.
but not copy or alter it.
That's a pretty clever way to balance accessibility with security.
Yeah.
So you've got these different layers of protection, segmentation, blockchain, one-way data valves.
Right.
But technology alone isn't enough, right?
You're absolutely right.
We still need to consider the human element, the
Yeah.
training and awareness piece.
The chapter really emphasizes that social engineering is becoming a bigger and bigger threat.
Yeah.
It's not enough to just have strong passwords and firewalls.
Right.
We need to educate people about the risks
Mm-hmm.
and teach them how to spot phishing scams, disinformation, and other forms of manipulation.
So it's about building a culture of security, not
Exactly.
just relying on technology to solve everything.
Right.
So what are some effective ways to do that?
Well, the chapter introduces this concept of purple team exercises.
Verbal team exercises?
Yeah.
What are those?
Imagine a cybersecurity game
Okay.
where you have two teams.
Okay.
The red team are the attackers.
Mm-hmm.
They're trying to break into a system.
Got it.
And the blue team are the defenders trying to
Oh.
protect it.
Okay.
So the purple team brings those two teams together
Mm-hmm.
and encourages them to learn from each other's tactics.
Okay.
It's a really effective way to build organizational resilience through training and awareness.
So it's like war games for your data,
Exactly.
with both sides learning from each other's moves.
Right.
That sounds like a really effective way to raise awareness and make security training more engaging.
It is, and the chapter provides a clear 4-step action plan to help organizations get started. It emphasizes defining security requirements,
Mm-hmm.
designing security learning activities,
Okay.
drafting robust security policies,
Mm-hmm.
and managing expectations and risks.
Okay. So it sounds like a pretty comprehensive approach.
It is.
Let's take a moment to process all of this before we move on to that action plan.
Sounds good.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so ready to unpack this 4-step action plan for boosting data security.
Absolutely. Yeah. You mentioned it starts with defining security requirements,
Right.
which sounds simple enough,
Mm-hmm.
but I have a feeling there's more to it than meets the eye.
You're right. It's not just about checking boxes.
Okay.
It's really about understanding what you need to protect,
Mm-hmm.
what the weak points are,
Okay.
and what could happen if a breach actually occurs.
Right, right.
And the chapter actually recommends using those purple team exercises we talked about earlier.
Ah, yes, the cybersecurity war games.
Exactly.
So it's kind of like a fire drill for your data.
Right.
You simulate an attack to see how well your defenses hold up.
Precisely. And the great thing about these exercises is that they involve both technical experts and everyday users.
Okay.
So you get a much more realistic picture of your organization's security posture.
So you're not just testing the technology,
Right.
You're also testing people's awareness and responses.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
All right, so step 1 is about like identifying the gaps in your security armor.
Mm-hmm.
What about step 2, designing security learning?
Well, this is where you take all those insights from step 1
Okay.
and turn them into training materials for your staff.
Got it.
And it's not enough to just hand them a list of security protocols.
Right.
You need to make it relevant to their daily work and give them the skills to actually apply those protocols.
So it's about going beyond those generic online training modules that everyone just clicks through without really absorbing anything.
Exactly. The chapter suggests using real-world examples
Okay.
and scenarios from your own organization to make the learning stick. You know, for example, you could create a simulation
Yeah.
where employees have to identify a phishing email or respond to a suspected data breach.
That sounds way more engaging than just reading a bunch of policies, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think so too.
All right, step 3 is drafting security policies.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we all know how much fun it is to read policies.
Right, they don't exactly have you on the edge of your seat.
Yeah, exactly.
But this chapter suggests a really interesting shift,
Okay.
moving away from a purely protocol-based approach
Okay.
to a more process-centric one.
Okay, I'm all for less paperwork.
Right.
But what does that actually mean in practice?
It means thinking about security as an ongoing process,
Okay.
not just a set of static rules.
Got it.
It's about defining roles and responsibilities, establishing clear communication channels,
Okay.
and creating a framework for continuous evaluation and improvement.
So it's about embedding security into the very fabric of your organization,
Right.
not just treating it as a separate department or a checklist.
Yeah, and the chapter gives some fascinating examples
Right.
from the military and financial industries,
Okay.
both of which deal with incredibly sensitive information
Right.
and have developed really sophisticated security processes.
I can only imagine those are high-stakes environments.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, and finally, step 4 is managing expectations and risks.
Yes.
So this is where we acknowledge that no system is perfect
Right.
and that breaches are bound to happen.
That's right. It's about being realistic about the limits of technology
Okay.
and understanding that the threat landscape is constantly evolving.
Right.
So this step involves setting clear metrics for evaluating your security program,
Okay.
regularly reviewing and updating your policies, and having a solid plan for incident response.
So it's about being prepared, not just hoping for the best.
Exactly.
Okay, we've covered the 4 steps, but before we wrap up completely,
Yeah.
I want to circle back to those specific technologies and approaches that the chapter recommends. We talked about Kerberos for authentication,
Right.
but what about protecting the actual data? You know, the chapter mentions network and organizational segmentation,
Yeah.
blockchain, and one-way data valves.
Mm-hmm.
Can you just remind us how those work and why they're so important?
Absolutely. These are all about creating multiple layers of security,
Okay.
making it much harder for attackers to access and compromise sensitive information.
So it's like building a castle
Exactly.
with multiple walls,
Right.
moats, and guard towers.
You got it.
You're making it as difficult as possible for anyone to get to the crown jewels,
Right.
even if they manage to breach one layer of defense.
Exactly.
Okay.
And network and organizational segmentation is like dividing your kingdom
Okay.
into smaller, more manageable territories.
Got it.
If one territory is compromised,
Right.
the attackers can't easily move to other areas.
Makes sense. You're containing the damage.
Right.
What about blockchain? You mentioned it earlier in the context of educational records, but I'm curious to learn a little bit more about how it actually works to secure data.
So imagine a digital ledger that's shared across multiple computers,
Okay.
with each transaction being recorded and verified by everyone in the network.
Mm-hmm.
That's the basic idea behind blockchain.
Okay.
Once a piece of information is added to the blockchain, it's virtually impossible to tamper with or alter it.
So it's like a public record that's constantly being audited and verified by everyone involved.
Exactly, and that makes it incredibly secure.
Okay.
Now, one-way data valves might be a little harder to visualize,
Yeah.
but think of it like a one-way street for data.
Okay, I'm starting to get the picture.
Yeah.
Data can go in,
Right,
but it can't come back out.
exactly. This is great for protecting sensitive data that needs to be accessed, but not copied or modified.
Right.
For example, imagine a researcher needs to analyze student data for a study.
Oh, okay.
They could access the data through a one-way valve,
Got it.
but they wouldn't be able to download or alter the original records.
That's really clever. It seems like we've got a pretty robust toolkit for protecting data
Yeah.
with these different technologies and strategies.
Okay.
But even with all of these safeguards in place, the human element is still a major factor, right?
Absolutely. Technology can only take us so far.
Right.
We still need to invest in training and awareness to help people make smart decisions about data security.
You mentioned earlier those purple team exercises where
Right.
the red team plays the attacker and the blue team defends.
Yeah.
I bet those can be really eye-opening.
They are.
You know, helping people understand the different ways attackers might try to exploit vulnerabilities.
It's a fun and engaging way to build those critical thinking skills and get people thinking about security in a more proactive way.
So it's not just about telling people what to do.
Right.
It's about giving them the tools and the knowledge
Yeah.
to make informed decisions about data security.
Exactly. It's about creating a culture of security where everyone understands the risks
Right.
and feels empowered to take action to protect data.
It sounds like we're moving towards a more holistic approach to data security.
Yeah.
You know, combining technology,
That's just gonna
process,
say-
and human awareness.
I think so.
But with all this talk about threats and vulnerabilities, it's easy to get overwhelmed.
Yeah.
What would you say to someone who's feeling a bit intimidated by all of this?
I would say that data security is a journey,
Okay,
not a destination.
got it.
It's an ongoing process of learning, adapting, and collaborating.
Right.
And the good news is that there are resources and tools available to help organizations of all sizes get started.
That's reassuring. It sounds like the key is to just start somewhere, take those first steps,
Yeah.
and build from there.
Absolutely.
You know, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We have.
From understanding the evolving threat landscape
Right.
to exploring these specific technologies and strategies for protecting learner data. And what I'm hearing is that while data security is a complex and ever-evolving challenge,
Yeah.
it's not insurmountable
Right.
by taking a proactive and multi-layered approach.
Absolutely.
Organizations can build resilient systems and foster a culture of security that minimizes risks
Yes.
and maximizes the potential of these future learning ecosystems.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
That's great.
As we move into an increasingly digital world,
Yeah,
data security is only going to become more critical.
for sure.
It's up to all of us to stay informed, stay engaged,
Yeah.
and work together to build a more secure future for learning.
And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive.
Sounds good.
You've given us a lot to think about.
I hope so.
You know, we've spent a lot of time talking about how to protect data in these future learning ecosystems.
Right.
But the chapter ends on this really thought-provoking note.
Yeah, it does.
Like, why are we collecting all this data in the first place?
It's a great question.
Yeah.
And it's one that often gets overlooked, I think.
Right.
In the rush to build,
Yeah.
bigger, better, more personalized learning systems.
Right. It's like we've been so focused on building the fortress that we haven't stopped to ask if we should be building a fortress.
Right, exactly.
Like,
as these systems become more and more sophisticated,
right,
tracking every click and pause,
yeah,
we really need to be mindful of the ethical considerations.
Yeah.
I mean, are we creating a surveillance state in the name of education?
Right, right.
At what point does personalized learning cross the line into an invasion of privacy?
It's a bit of Pandora's box, isn't it?
It is.
Once you start collecting all this data,
yeah,
it's hard to know where to draw the line.
It really is. There are no easy answers.
Right.
But I think transparency is key.
Okay.
Learners need to understand what data is being collected, how it's being used, and who has access to it.
Right. And they should have a say
Absolutely.
in how their data is managed.
100%.
So it's about empowering learners to take control of their own data, not just treating them as data points in some giant system.
Exactly. And it's about designing systems that are ethical and privacy conscious from the ground up.
We've covered so much in this deep dive.
We have.
And
it's been great.
It's clear that data security is a really multifaceted challenge.
It is.
With no easy solutions.
For sure.
But I think you've given us a great framework for thinking about these issues.
Well, thank you.
Both from a technical and an ethical standpoint.
I think it's important to remember that this is just the starting point.
Right.
As technology continues to evolve, this conversation around data security is going to evolve with it.
Yeah.
It's an ongoing process of learning.
For sure.
Adapting and working together to find the right balance.
Well said. Well said.
Thank you.
You've given us a lot to think about, and I bet our listener has a whole new perspective on data security in the world of learning.
I hope so.
So stay curious and stay secure out there.